My dress tore at the entrance to the ballroom. Laughter erupted like fireworks. The loudest came from my stepfather, Rick. 2 minutes later, in that cold hallway, he raised his hand. And that's when I activated the plan I'd been preparing for 3 months. The cameras were rolling, witnesses were positioned exactly where they needed to be, and a year of being looked down upon ended with the click of handcuffs. My name is Lena Hart, and at 32, I'd perfected the art of invisible survival in my own family, but standing at the entrance of the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall that November evening, watching my mother's 20th wedding anniversary unfold like a theatrical production I'd never auditioned for, I knew invisibility was about to shatter. The fabric caught first a deliberate snag on the decorative table edge that someone had conveniently positioned too close to the doorway. The sound came next, that specific ripping of expensive silk that makes everyone within 50 feet turn their heads. Time dilated. I felt the cool air hit my exposed thigh as the dress split from knee to hip, revealing the slip underneath that thankfully covered enough to maintain basic dignity. But dignity was never the point of this moment. "Oh my God, Lena!" The voice boomed across the ballroom. Rick Dalton, my stepfather, already 3 whiskeys deep into his performance as the successful businessman. "Did you get that dress from a clearance rack? You get what you pay for, sweetheart." The laughter started in waves. First from Kyle, Rick's son, his phone already up and recording, the camera flash reflecting off his fraternity ring. Then the cousins joined in, the business partners. Even some of the wait staff couldn't suppress their smirks. My mother stood frozen near the anniversary cake, her face a careful mask of mortification and practiced neutrality, the expression she'd worn for 2 decades whenever Rick decided I needed to be put in my place. I stood perfectly still, letting them look. My eyes swept across the ballroom with practiced precision security camera in the northwest corner, operational and blinking red, 2 more cameras by the main entrance. The security guards Marcus and Jerome, whom I'd identified during my reconnaissance visits over the past months, were positioned exactly where they always stood during events, with clear sight lines to the entrance. "Someone get her a tablecloth," Rick continued, playing to his audience. His face was flushed with alcohol and the specific pleasure he got from these moments. 20 years of practice had taught him exactly how to humiliate without crossing the lines that might make his audience uncomfortable. Kyle zoomed in with his phone. "This is going in the family album," he laughed, that particular nasal tone he used when he knew Daddy would approve. "Maybe we should start a GoFundMe for Lena's wardrobe." The crowd erupted again. I counted the witnesses, 43 people with clear view of the entrance. Perfect. My fingers found the torn edge of the dress, and I held it closed with one hand, not out of shame, but precision. Every movement needed to appear vulnerable, desperate. Inside my chest, my heart maintained its steady rhythm, not the panicked percussion they expected, but the measured beat of someone watching dominoes begin to fall. I'll go find something to fix this," I said, my voice deliberately small, just loud enough for the closest witnesses to hear the tremor I'd practiced in my car. "Don't bother coming back looking like a hobo," Rick called after me. "This is a classy event. For family who can dress appropriately." More laughter. Kyle high-fived his girlfriend. My mother finally moved, taking a step toward me before Rick's hand on her wrist stopped her. She knew her role too. I turned toward the hallway that led to the restrooms and service corridor. Each step calculated to look like a retreat. Behind me, I heard Rick launching into one of his stories about how he'd built his roofing empire from nothing, how some people had drive and others just expected handouts. The irony would have been delicious if I hadn't already tasted it so many times before. The hallway stretched ahead, dimmer than the ballroom, with its own security camera mounted at the midpoint. I'd counted 17 steps from the ballroom door to the blind spot between cameras during my previous visits. 17 steps before the next phase would begin. Behind me, footsteps, heavy, slightly uneven from the whiskey, right on schedule. Running away again. "Lena." Rick's voice echoed off the walls. That's your problem. No backbone. No wonder you're 32 and still alone. I stopped at step 15, turned slightly, letting the camera catch my profile. My internal monologue sang with dark satisfaction. Keep talking. Rick. Every word is evidence. Every step is documented. 3 months of preparation for this moment, and you're playing your part perfectly. The torn dress hung like a battle flag. The laughter from the ballroom filtered through the door like a symphony reaching its crescendo. And Rick Dalton, master of the house, king of his small domain, walked straight into the trap I'd set with the same confidence he'd wielded against me for 18 years. Good, I thought, feeling my phone's weight in my clutch, the emergency dial screen already prepared. Keep coming, keep talking. The cameras are watching, and tonight, for the first time in 20 years, that's exactly what I need. The hallway felt like a time machine, pulling me back 18 years to when I first met Rick Dalton. I was 14, still raw from losing my father to a car accident 6 months earlier. Mom introduced Rick as her friend from grief counseling, though I later learned they'd met on a dating site. He arrived at our door with flowers for her and nothing for me, a pattern that would define the next 2 decades. Your mother tells me you're quite the little student, he'd said that first day, his smile not reaching his eyes. Good. You can take care of yourself then. And I did. When Mom married him a year later, I was already working weekends at a local grocery store, saving for college while Kyle, 2 years younger than me, got a new gaming system for joining the family. When I graduated valedictorian, Rick took the family to dinner at a sports bar so Kyle could watch his game. When Kyle barely scraped through high school, Rick threw a party that cost more than my entire year of textbooks. You're so independent, Lena, my mother would say, her voice tinged with something between pride and relief. You don't need what Kyle needs. What Kyle needed, apparently, was everything. Private tutors when he struggled in community college, a new truck when he crashed the first one, a position at Dalton Roofing that required no experience and came with a flexible schedule. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs through college, graduated summa cum laude with a finance degree, and built my career from an unpaid internship to my current position as compliance team lead at ForgePoint Analytics. The bitter irony I'd been secretly propping up their lifestyle for years. When Mom's medical bills overwhelmed her after her lupus diagnosis, I paid them without telling her, letting her believe Rick's insurance covered everything. When Dalton Roofing hit rough patches, which happened every time Rick decided he understood market trends better than actual economists, I'd mysteriously find ways to send clients his way through careful networking. Last year alone, I'd covered $32,000 in various family expenses, always indirectly, always invisibly. You make good money now, Rick would say at family dinners. Never a question, always a statement. Must be nice to only worry about yourself. Kyle would chime in. Some of us have real responsibilities. The business, family legacy, the family legacy. The will I'd accidentally seen 3 months ago when helping Mom find her insurance papers had made that legacy crystal clear. Everything to Kyle, the house, the business, even my grandmother's jewelry that had been my father's mother's before she died. Lena's successful, Rick had written in his crude handwriting on a sticky note attached to the draft. She doesn't need inheritance. Kyle will carry on the family name. What family name Dalton wasn't even my name? I'd kept heart out of stubborn loyalty to my father, the man who'd taught me to read balance sheets at age 10, who'd said I could be anything I wanted, who'd died before seeing what his widow would choose over his daughter's dignity. The manipulation was surgical in its precision. Every family gathering included subtle reminders of my outsider status, photo arrangements where I was always slightly apart, stories that began when we went to, followed by trips I hadn't been invited on. The Christmas when Rick gave Kyle a Rolex and me a $25 gift card, then spent 10 minutes explaining how thoughtful it was because Lena loves her independence. But the cruelest cut was watching my mother transform from the woman who'd raised me into Rick's echo. She'd stopped defending me first, then stopped seeing me altogether. When I tried telling her about Rick's requests for money, never called loans, because family doesn't pay back family. According to him, she'd say I was being dramatic. When I showed her my bank statements, proving I'd been supporting them, she accused me of trying to make Rick look bad. He's been so good to us, she'd insist, as if us included me, as if I hadn't been the one ensuring the mortgage was paid when Rick's gambling debts came calling. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago. Another family dinner. Another request for help with a supplier invoice. When I hesitated, Rick's face had darkened. "After everything this family has done for you," he'd said, his voice low and dangerous. "Your mother and I took you in, gave you stability after your father died. Took me in, like I was a stray dog, not my mother's daughter. Like the house hadn't been paid for by my father's life insurance. Like stability meant watching everything my father built get renamed Dalton. That night, I'd gone home and started planning. Not revenge exactly. Revenge implies emotion, and I'd moved past emotion into something colder, more precise. Justice, maybe. Or just balance in the ledger that had been tilted against me for so long. Standing in that hallway now, dress torn, dignity supposedly shattered, I thought about that 14-year-old girl who'd believed her mother would always choose her. She'd been wrong, but she'd also been stronger than anyone realized, strong enough to survive, to thrive despite them, and now, strong enough to end this charade on her own terms. The discovery started with a credit alert on my phone at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. "New account opened in your name, Mountain West Equipment Financing." I hadn't applied for any equipment financing. My hands shook as I logged into the credit monitoring service, finding a $70,000 loan application with my social security number, my date of birth, but a signature that looked like mine only if you squinted and had never seen my actual handwriting. The beneficiary, Dalton Roofing and Home Repair? I spent the rest of that night pulling documents, and what I found was a masterclass in financial manipulation. Rick hadn't just stolen my identity once he'd been using it strategically for 2 years. Small credit inquiries that wouldn't trigger alerts. Authorized user additions to business credit cards that built up my commercial credit profile. And finally, this equipment loan that would fund his next expansion while destroying my credit when he defaulted. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to 3 different banks, requesting 5 years of statements. The pattern emerged like a photograph in developer fluid. Every month, my gifts to the family were being rerouted. I'd send money to Mom for medical expenses. It would disappear into a business account. I'd pay a family dinner bill. Rick would submit it as a business expense and pocket the reimbursement. The $15,000 I'd given them for Mom's emergency surgery last year. The hospital had no record of any procedure, but the insurance fraud was what made my blood turn to ice. I found it in an email Rick had mistakenly sent to my old address, one still forwarded to my current account. Workers' comp claim Darfur A837R, Dalton lumbar strain injury. The date matched perfectly with Kyle's basketball tournament in Vail. The medical provider's invoice showed treatments Rick couldn't have received while he was posting photos from the ski resort. $17,000 in fraudulent claims over 18 months, all meticulously documented in emails he thought were going to a dead account. My laptop became command central. Folder after folder of evidence bank statements highlighted and annotated, forged signatures analyzed against genuine ones. A timeline spreadsheet that mapped every theft against family events. The Sunday dinners where Rick complained about tough times while wearing a new Omega watch. The Thanksgiving where he'd asked me to cover Mom's prescriptions while his Porsche sat in the driveway, purchased 3 days earlier. I photographed Rick's home office during Mom's birthday party, pretending to look for aspirin. His desk drawer, carelessly unlocked, contained a handwritten ledger, the kind of old-school record-keeping he thought was safer than digital. Each line item showed money coming from L being transferred to K College Fund, Kyle's college fund that he'd supposedly depleted years ago. The account numbers matched a Charles Schwab statement I'd glimpsed, showing a balance of $93,000. The most damning evidence came from Kyle himself, careless in his entitlement. His Instagram stories showed purchases matching exact amounts withdrawn from the family emergency fund I'd been contributing to. A $4,000 watch posted the day after I'd sent money for Mom's heart medication. A Vegas trip with his fraternity brothers funded by my loan for emergency roof repairs at the house. I started recording conversations, Colorado being a one-party consent state, Rick asking for $5,000 for urgent medical treatment while scheduling his country club tea time in the background. Kyle laughing about how Lena's good for it when he thought I'd walked away from the speakerphone. Mom sighing that she wished she could help with my rent, unaware I'd been covering her mortgage for 3 years. The meeting with Ava Morales took place in her downtown Denver office, a corner suite that spoke of successful prosecutions and favorable settlements. She reviewed my documentation with the intensity of a surgeon, occasionally making notes, sometimes asking for clarification. After 2 hours, she leaned back. This is extensive financial fraud, identity theft, and potentially elder abuse given your mother's medical condition. The insurance fraud alone could result in federal charges. Then came Officer Priya Gomez from the Financial Crimes Unit, recommended by Morales. She examined everything with a detective's eye, particularly interested in the pattern of escalation. Perpetrators like this get bolder over time, she explained. The equipment loan shows he's moving into major fraud territory. We can build a case, but we need a triggering event, something that makes him reveal himself publicly. I knew exactly what that event would be. The anniversary party had been planned for months, Rick's chance to showcase his success to Denver's construction community. 300 guests, local media coverage for the self-made businessman's love story, and most importantly, Rick's ego on full display after generous amounts of whiskey. If he becomes physically aggressive, Morales had warned, do not engage, document everything, call 911 immediately. He won't, I'd said then, still believing Rick was too smart to cross that line. But sitting in my apartment the night before the party, arranging my evidence files into a prosecutorial timeline, I wondered if I'd underestimated how far a cornered man would go to maintain his control. The dress I'd bought for the party hung on my closet door, expensive, elegant, the kind of thing Rick would hate to see me wear because it didn't fit his narrative of struggling, dependent Lena. I uploaded everything to 3 different cloud services, gave Morales and Gomez access to one each, and set up automated emails to trigger if I didn't check in every 12 hours. Perhaps paranoid, but Rick had taught me that family could become your greatest threat when money was involved. The last thing I did was write a letter to my 14-year-old self, the girl who'd stood in our living room watching her mother choose a stranger's comfort over her daughter's truth. I told her she'd been right to feel betrayed, right to protect herself, and right to wait for the perfect moment to balance the scales. Then I sealed it, addressed it to myself, and marked it to be opened after the party, after the confrontation, after 18 years of being treated like a withdrawal-enabled ATM with no rights to dignity or respect. The evidence was complete, the trap was set, and tomorrow, Rick Dalton would learn that the girl he'd dismissed as weak had spent 3 months becoming his worst nightmare, a victim with receipts. The systematic dismantling began on a Monday morning at 9:30 sharp. I sat at my desk at ForgePoint Analytics, my personal laptop open beside my work computer, executing each step with the precision I'd learned from years in compliance. Every action documented, every communication backed up, every move legally bulletproof. First, the bank accounts. I'd maintained 3 joint accounts with my mother from when Dad died, artifacts of estate planning that Rick never knew existed. I withdrew my portions, leaving exactly $1 in each to keep them open. The family emergency fund I'd established went next, transferred to a new high-yield savings account at a different bank. The automatic transfers I'd set up to help with Mom's prescriptions, utilities, and groceries all canceled effective immediately. The credit cards came next. I was an authorized user on several of Rick's business accounts, added years ago during a cash flow crisis when he needed my credit score to secure better rates. Removed myself from every single one. The interesting part: the removal notifications would go to the primary account holder Rick, but not for 5 to 7 business days. By then, it would be too late for him to leverage my credit for his latest scheme. I drafted the formal notification email to Rick and my mother with the cold efficiency of a corporate memo. Effective today, I am restructuring my financial commitments. Medical support for Mom's lupus treatment will continue for 60 days to ensure continuity of care. After that period, all financial assistance will cease. Please make alternative arrangements. Additionally, I have removed myself from all shared financial instruments and credit accounts. Any attempts to utilize my personal information for financial purposes will be reported to the appropriate authorities. I scheduled it to send at 5 p.m. after business hours, when Rick would be at his country club and unable to storm into my office. The call to Charles Schwab took 12 minutes. Using the account information I'd photographed from Rick's ledger, I informed them of potential fraudulent activity involving a minor's college fund being used for non-educational expenses. They launched an internal investigation immediately. Kyle's $93,000 slush fund would be frozen within hours. Mountain West Equipment Financing received my fraud affidavit via certified mail and secure email. Attached were copies of my actual signature, proof of my whereabouts when the loan was allegedly signed, and a police report number from Officer Gomez's preliminary investigation. The loan was flagged for review, and Dalton Roofing's credit would be locked pending investigation. Ava Morales had prepared 3 documents: a cease and desist letter regarding the use of my personal information, a formal fraud complaint with supporting documentation, and a request for an emergency protective order based on Rick's escalating financial crimes and controlling behavior. "We're not filing the protective order yet," she explained during our afternoon call. "But it's ready. If he makes any threats, shows up at your work, or attempts any form of retaliation, we file immediately." The forensic accountant Morales recommended. David Huang had spent the weekend analyzing my documentation. His preliminary report was damning: over $280,000 siphoned through various schemes over 7 years. The pattern showed clear intent and escalation. More importantly, it showed conspiracy. Kyle's involvement made this organized fraud. Officer Gomez called at 3 p.m. "We've opened a formal investigation. The insurance fraud alone warrants federal involvement. FBI might take interest given the interstate commerce aspects of the equipment financing fraud." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. Just the cold clarity of watching dominoes positioned over months finally starting to tip. The IT department at ForgePoint helped me enhance my digital security new passwords. 2-factor authentication on everything. Alerts for any credit inquiries. My supervisor, Janet, noticed my intensity. "Everything okay, Lena? You seem different today." "Just implementing some personal security upgrades," I replied. "Identity theft concerns?" She nodded sympathetically, not knowing how literal my concerns were. At 4:45 p.m., I received a text from Kyle. "Hey, cuz, Dad wanted me to ask about that invoice thing. You covering it?" I screenshotted it without responding. Another piece of evidence for the file: Kyle actively participating in the solicitation of funds he knew were obtained through emotional manipulation. At 5 p.m., the email sent. At 5:18 p.m., my phone exploded. Rick called 17 times in 10 minutes. I didn't answer, but I recorded every voicemail. "What the hell is this? Lena, you can't just abandon your mother. This is illegal. You can't withdraw support we've been counting on. Answer your goddamn phone. You owe us an explanation. Your father would be ashamed of how selfish you've become." Each message more aggressive than the last, his voice escalating from anger to rage. Exactly what Morales had predicted. Mom's call came at 6:23 p.m., her voice tearful but rehearsed. "Lena, sweetheart, I don't understand. Why are you trying to hurt our family? Rick's just trying to run his business, and Kyle needs our support to succeed." I almost broke then. Almost explained everything. Instead, I stuck to the script Morales had prepared. "Mom, I love you. My decision is about my own financial health. Medical support continues for 60 days. Please speak with Rick about alternative arrangements. The next morning, Tuesday, Dalton Roofing's main business account was frozen pending the fraud investigation. Rick discovered this when trying to pay his crew. By noon, 3 clients had called asking about the FBI inquiries into his insurance claims. By 3 p.m., Mountain West Equipment had initiated asset recovery procedures, but Rick still didn't know I had everything documented. He thought this was just bad luck, maybe some oversight at the bank, a misunderstanding with insurance. He was scrambling, pulling strings, calling in favors, never realizing that every move he made was being watched, recorded, added to a file marked State of Colorado versus Richard Dalton. The anniversary party was 4 days away. The invitations had gone out months ago, non-refundable deposits paid. Rick's reputation staked on the success of this event. He couldn't cancel without losing face, couldn't postpone without raising questions. He was trapped by his own ego, forced to attend his own commemoration while his financial empire crumbled in real time. I confirmed my RSVP that evening, selecting the salmon entree and noting I'd attend alone. Then I went shopping for the perfect dress, something expensive enough to infuriate Rick, elegant enough to be remembered by witnesses, and sturdy enough to withstand whatever the evening might bring. The saleswoman at Nordstrom helped me select a midnight blue silk dress that cost more than Rick believed I deserved to spend on myself in a year. As she wrapped it in tissue paper, she commented on how it brought out my eyes. "Special occasion?" she asked. "A family celebration," I replied, thinking of the 3 security guards who'd be working the venue, the 4 cameras covering the main hall, and the dozen witnesses Morales had suggested I position myself near throughout the evening. "You'll look stunning," she said. I smiled, thinking of Rick's face when he realized the girl he'd dismissed, degraded, and stolen from had spent 3 months transforming herself from victim to prosecutor, from family shame to his worst nightmare. That's the plan. The messages started Thursday morning, 48 hours before the party. Rick had discovered the frozen accounts were no accident, and his texts came in like artillery fire. "You vindictive little bitch! You think you can destroy everything I've built. Your mother is crying because of what you're doing to our family. Kyle's future is ruined because of your jealousy. The mortgage payment bounced. Your mother's house." I screenshot each one, forwarding them to Morales while maintaining radio silence. Let him spiral. Let him show everyone who he really was when the mask slipped. By Friday evening, his tone shifted to negotiation. "Lena, let's discuss this like adults. Come to dinner tomorrow before the party. We can work this out. Family helps family." I responded with 2 words. "See you at the anniversary celebration." Saturday arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect Denver autumn days that made the mountains look painted against the sky. I spent the morning at a spa, getting my hair and makeup professionally done. The stylist, noting the elegant dress I'd brought, created an intricate updo that exposed my neck and shoulders vulnerable, elegant, and perfect for showing any marks that might appear later. I arrived at the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall at 7:45 p.m., fashionably late enough that most guests were already mingling, early enough that Rick wouldn't be drunk yet. The valet took my keys with the appreciative whistle at my dress. I'd chosen to walk through the main entrance rather than the side door family usually used. I wanted witnesses from the very beginning. The ballroom glittered with Rick's attempt at grandeur. Ice sculptures, a live band, probably 300 guests who represented his entire professional network. The banner reading 20 Years of Love. Rick and Marjorie Dalton hung above the head table where my mother sat, looking beautiful but tired in a dress I recognized from 3 years ago. Rick spotted me immediately. His face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, surprise that I'd actually come, rage at my audacity, then forced composure as business associates noticed his attention shift. He was trapped in his own show, unable to make a scene without destroying the image he'd spent 2 decades cultivating. "Lena." My cousin Patricia waved me over to the family table. "Oh my God, that dress, you look like $1 million. "Just trying to honor the occasion," I replied, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. 20 years is quite an achievement. Kyle approached, his girlfriend Brittany trailing behind. Didn't think you'd show after your little tantrum this week. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, maintaining eye contact. How's your college fund doing? By the way, any issues with Charles Schwab? His face went white. What did you... Rick's voice cut across the room. Come here. Need you to meet the Hendersons. As Kyle walked away, I made my rounds, positioning myself near different groups of Rick's business associates. Each conversation carefully innocent, discussing Denver's growth, the construction market, anything that would make me memorable to these potential witnesses. I accepted a glass of champagne but didn't drink, keeping my senses sharp. At 8:30 p.m., dinner was served. I sat at the family table, strategically placed between Patricia and my great-aunt Dorothy, both gossips who would remember every detail of the evening. Rick stood to make his toast, his fourth whiskey evident in the slight sway of his stance. 20 years ago, I met Marjorie at the lowest point in both our lives, he began, not mentioning my father's death directly, but letting it hang there. I took on not just a wife, but a ready-made family. Some men would run from that responsibility. Not me. I provided stability, security, success. His eyes found mine across the table. Not everyone appreciates what it takes to build something from nothing. Some people just take, never giving back, never showing gratitude. The room was silent. Everyone felt the tension without understanding its source. Mom stared at her plate. But tonight isn't about disappointments. Rick continued, his voice harder. It's about those who contribute, who build rather than tear down. My son Kyle, who'll be taking over Dalton Roofing next year. Applause. Kyle stood, waving. I noticed him check his phone repeatedly. Charles Schwab's fraud department worked weekends. Apparently. When dinner ended and dancing began, Rick approached my table. We need to talk. Now. Here. I gestured to the crowded room. This is hardly the place. Outside hall, 5 minutes, or I announce to everyone what you've been stealing from the company. Stealing. The projection was so perfect I almost laughed. Instead, I made sure Patricia and Dorothy heard his demand, saw his aggressive posture, noticed my reluctant agreement. If you insist, I said, standing slowly. But I'm calling my attorney first, just so someone knows where I am. Your attorney. His voice cracked slightly. What attorney? I pulled out my phone, making a show of scrolling to Morales' contact. The one handling the fraud investigation. You know, the equipment loan you took out in my name, the insurance claims for injuries you never had. That attorney... The color drained from his face, then flooded back red. You lying little... Rick, Mr. Henderson appeared beside us. Everything all right here? Rick forced a smile. Family discussion. You know how it is. Henderson looked at me, concern evident. Miss Hart, are you comfortable? Just need to make a quick call, I said, holding up my phone. Then apparently my stepfather needs to discuss something privately. I dialed Morales' emergency line as I walked toward the hallway, loud enough for Henderson and others to hear. Hi, it's Lena Hart. I'm at the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall. Rick Dalton has demanded I meet him in the hallway. Yes, I'll stay in view of cameras. Yes, if anything happens, I'll call 911 immediately. When I reached the hallway, I positioned myself exactly where I'd stood during my reconnaissance clear view of 2 security cameras, within earshot of the bathroom entrance where guests regularly passed. I opened my phone's recording app, slipped it into my clutch with the microphone facing out, and waited. Rick stormed out 30 seconds later, his face twisted with rage, Kyle trailing behind him. The door hadn't fully closed. I could hear music and voices from inside, meaning they could hear us too. How dare you? He started, his voice low and dangerous. How dare you come here, wearing that dress like you're someone important, after trying to destroy my business? I'm not trying to destroy anything, I replied calmly. I'm just protecting myself from fraud." "Fraud." His voice rose. "You've been stealing from this family for years, all that money you promised, then reneged on. You mean the money you stole by forging my signature on loan documents?" Kyle stepped forward. "Dad, people can hear." "Shut up," Rick snapped at his son, then turned back to me. "You're going to fix this. You're going to call off whatever investigation you started, or I swear to God, you'll what?" I kept my voice steady, professional. "Hit me like you've wanted to for years." His hand twitched. Security guard Marcus had appeared at the far end of the hallway, watching. 2 women exited the bathroom, freezing when they felt the tension. "Everything dies tonight," Rick snarled. "Your reputation, your job, your relationship with your mother." "You think you've won something? You've lost everything." "Is that a threat?" I asked clearly, ensuring the cameras and witnesses caught every word. That's when his control finally, completely shattered. Rick grabbed my wrist first, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks. The hallway seemed to narrow, the cream-colored walls reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights that caught every detail, the sweat on his forehead, the vein pulsing at his temple, the way Kyle stood frozen behind him like a statue. "Let go of me," I said, my voice carrying down the corridor where Marcus the security guard had started walking toward us, his hand moving to his radio. "You're not walking away from this," Rick hissed, pulling me closer. The smell of whiskey and cologne made my stomach turn. "Not until you fix what you've done." Mrs. Henderson, the wife of Rick's biggest client, emerged from the bathroom, her gasp echoing off the walls. Behind her, another woman I recognized as a reporter from the Denver Construction Quarterly stopped mid-step, her phone already in her hand. "Rick," Kyle warned. "Dad, there are cameras." I said shut up. Rick's grip tightened, and that's when he made his second mistake. He yanked me toward him with enough force that my dress, that beautiful, expensive dress, caught on his Rolex. The sound of tearing silk was like a gunshot in the narrow space. The fabric split from my shoulder down to my ribs, the dress falling away to reveal the burgundy slip underneath. For a moment, everyone froze, Rick still gripping my wrist, the witnesses staring, the security camera's red light blinking steadily above us. Then came the laughter from the ballroom as someone told a joke, the sound filtering through the cracked door like a mockery of the violence happening in this fluorescent-lit purgatory. "My dress," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, letting shock and hurt color my voice. "You tore my dress?" Rick released my wrist and actually smiled that cruel, triumphant smile I'd seen so many times before. "Maybe now you'll learn not to waste money on things you can't afford." Marcus was 10 feet away now, speaking into his radio. Mrs. Henderson had her phone out. The reporter was definitely recording. And Rick, drunk on whiskey and rage, didn't notice any of it. "Please," I said, taking a step back, holding the torn fabric with one hand. "Just let me leave. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble." Rick advanced on me, backing me against the wall. "You destroyed my business, turned my family against me, and you don't want trouble." "Sir, step back," Marcus commanded, now close enough to intervene. His partner Jerome had appeared at the other end of the hallway, boxing Rick in, but Rick was beyond reason. He shoved me both hands on my shoulders, pushing me hard against the wall. My head hit the surface with a crack that seemed to echo. Stars burst across my vision, real this time, not manufactured for effect. "Dad!" Kyle shouted, finally moving, trying to pull Rick back. "Don't touch me," I said clearly, my hand already reaching for my phone. "I'm calling 911. Rick's hand swung up, and everything went into slow motion. I saw it coming, the open palm aimed at my face, the rage that had built for 18 years finally manifesting in physical violence. I could have ducked, could have blocked it, but I didn't. I stood perfectly still and let him hit me. The slap connected with enough force to turn my head, the sound sharp and distinctive in the enclosed space. My cheek exploded with heat, and I tasted copper where my teeth cut the inside of my mouth. The hallway erupted. Marcus rushed forward, grabbing Rick's arm before he could swing again. Jerome appeared on his other side, both guards working to restrain him as he struggled and swore. Mrs. Henderson screamed. The reporter kept filming. Kyle stood with his mouth open, his face white as paper. I pressed my phone to my ear, having already dialed. 911, this is Lena Hart. I'm at the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall on Sheridan Boulevard. My stepfather, Rick Dalton, just physically assaulted me. There are security guards restraining him now. Yes, I'm safe. Yes, there are cameras and multiple witnesses. No, I don't need an ambulance, but I want to press charges. Thank you. The entire call took 30 seconds. By the time I finished, half the ballroom had spilled into the hallway, drawn by the commotion. They saw Rick, red-faced and struggling against two security guards. They saw me, dress torn, cheek already swelling, standing with dignified calm despite the violence. They saw Kyle, trying to disappear into the wallpaper. "He's crazy," Rick shouted, still fighting the guard's grip. "She's lying. She's been stealing from us. This is all an act." "Sir, you need to calm down," Marcus said firmly. "The police are on their way." "Police?" Rick's struggles intensified. "For what? For disciplining a thief." "For assault," Jerome corrected. "We saw everything. It's all on camera." I stood there, letting everyone see. The torn dress, the red mark on my face that was already darkening into a bruise, the finger marks on my wrist. Patricia pushed through the crowd, gasping when she saw me. "Oh my God, Lena, your face." "I'm okay," I said, my voice carrying to the gathered crowd. I just wanted to celebrate their anniversary. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." My mother appeared then, still in her anniversary dress, her face a mask of horror. She looked at Rick, at me, at the torn dress and the violence written on my skin. "Rick," she whispered, "what did you do?" "Your daughter is trying to destroy us," he roared. "She's been planning this. It's all fake." But the evidence was clear, the cameras that had recorded everything. The witnesses who'd seen him grab me, shove me, hit me. The security guards who'd had to physically restrain him. The torn dress that hung like a battle flag of his violence. The sound of sirens grew closer, their wail cutting through the Denver night. Red and blue lights began to flash through the windows at the end of the hallway. The police were here, and with them, the end of Rick Dalton's carefully constructed kingdom. I touched my swelling cheek gently, feeling the heat radiating from it. The pain was real, sharp and throbbing, but underneath it was something else: satisfaction. 3 months of planning, and he'd played his part perfectly. The cameras had caught everything. The witnesses had seen it all. And now, with the police walking through the door, the final act was about to begin. Marcus guided me to a chair someone had brought from the ballroom, his voice gentle. "Ma'am, are you sure you don't need medical attention?" "I'm okay," I repeated, though my head was pounding from where it had hit the wall. "I just want to give my statement. I want this documented properly." The crowd parted as 2 officers entered, their presence immediately commanding attention. Rick's struggles ceased, reality finally penetrating his whiskey-soaked rage. He looked at the officers, at the cameras, at the crowd of his business associates who'd just watched him assault his stepdaughter at his own anniversary party. "Officers," I said, standing carefully, mindful of how I appeared victim. "Yes, but not broken. Never broken. I need to report an assault, and there's more financial fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud. I have documentation for everything." The taller officer, whose badge read Mitchell, looked at the scene: Rick being held by security, me with my torn dress and bruised face, the crowd of horrified witnesses. "Ma'am, let's start with what happened here tonight. Then we'll address the other allegations." I nodded, pulling my phone from my clutch. "I have audio recording of the entire encounter." And these gentlemen, I gestured to Marcus and Jerome, witnessed everything, as did these people. I indicated Mrs. Henderson, the reporter, and the dozen other guests who'd watched Rick lose control. The second officer approached Rick. "Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." "This is ridiculous," Rick protested. "She's lying. This is all a setup." But his protests fell on deaf ears. The evidence was overwhelming, the violence undeniable. As the officer produced handcuffs, their metallic click seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the hallway. The handcuffs clicked around Rick's wrists with a finality that seemed to echo through the entire building. His face had gone from red to purple, veins standing out on his neck as he continued to struggle against the inevitable. "You can't do this," he shouted at Officer Mitchell. "I'm a business owner, I have connections. This is my anniversary party." "Sir, you're under arrest for assault," Mitchell stated calmly. "You have the right to remain silent." "I know my rights," Rick spat, then turned his fury toward me. "You planned this, you vindictive little—" "That's enough." The second officer, badge reading Kozlowski, interrupted. "Sir, making threats in front of law enforcement isn't helping your case." That's when Officer Priya Gomez walked through the door, and I watched Rick's face transform from rage to confusion to dawning horror. She wasn't in uniform. She wore a crisp blazer with her badge clipped to the belt, but her presence radiated authority. "Officer Gomez," I said, relief flooding my voice. "Financial Crimes Unit." "Ms. Hart." She nodded, then addressed the uniforms. "I have an active investigation involving Mr. Dalton. We'll need to coordinate." "What investigation?" Rick's voice cracked. "What are you talking about?" Gomez pulled out a folded document. "Mr. Dalton, we have a warrant to search your business premises based on evidence of loan fraud, identity theft, and insurance fraud. Your office is being searched as we speak." Kyle, who'd been trying to blend into the wallpaper, suddenly lunged forward. "You can't search without him there. He needs a lawyer." "Actually," Gomez said coolly, "we can, and we are. Mr. Kyle Dalton, we'll need to speak with you as well regarding several suspicious transfers from accounts linked to fraudulent loans." The crowd of onlookers had grown, pressing against the hallway's confines. I spotted 3 of Rick's biggest clients, the president of his country club, and yes, the reporter from Denver Construction Quarterly was still recording everything. Ava Morales arrived then, her heels clicking authoritatively against the floor. She moved through the crowd like a ship through water, people instinctively stepping aside. She carried a leather portfolio that I knew contained copies of every piece of evidence we'd collected. "Officers," she announced, "I'm Ava Morales, representing Ms. Hart. I have documentation of systematic financial abuse, identity theft, and fraud spanning several years." She handed a flash drive to Gomez. "Email threats sent in the last 72 hours, recordings of attempted extortion, and evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud." "This is insane!" Rick shouted. "Marjorie, tell them she's lying." My mother stood frozen, her anniversary dress suddenly looking like a costume she'd been wearing in someone else's play. "Rick, the loan documents. You said Lena agreed?" "She did agree. She's family helps family." "By forging my signature," I said quietly, but my voice carried. "By stealing my social security number, by claiming injuries you never had to collect insurance money." Morales opened her portfolio, pulling out a document. "Officers, this is a medical report from St. Joseph's Hospital showing Mr. Dalton was treated for severe back trauma on March 15th. However," she produced another paper. "Here's time-stamped photos from his son's Instagram showing Mr. Dalton playing basketball in Vail that same weekend." The crowd gasped. Mrs. Henderson whispered something to her husband. The country club president stepped back as if Rick's fraud might be contagious. "Additionally," Morales continued, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "we have evidence of Mr. Dalton taking out a $70,000 equipment loan using Ms. Hart's identity, falsifying her signature, and routing the funds to personal accounts." "That was for the business," Rick protested. She promised to help. I have the forged signature right here. Morales held up the document, along with a forensic handwriting analysis that confirms it's fraudulent. Officer Kozlowski was taking notes rapidly. Ma'am, we'll need you to come to the station to file formal charges. Of course, I said, then winced as the movement sent pain through my head where it had hit the wall. Should I go to the hospital first to document the injuries? That would be advisable, Mitchell confirmed. We'll need photographs of all injuries for evidence. This is entrapment, Rick screamed, his composure completely shattered. She set me up. She wanted this to happen. No, I said, meeting his eyes for the first time since he'd hit me. I wanted you to stop stealing from me. I wanted you to treat me like family instead of a bank account. I gave you every chance to stop. You chose this. The manager of the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall appeared with a laptop. Officers, I've pulled the security footage you requested. Multiple angles of the hallway, all time-stamped. She knew about the cameras, Rick accused. She positioned herself deliberately. So you're admitting you assaulted her? Kozlowski asked. You just thought it wouldn't be recorded. Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Gomez stepped forward. Mr. Dalton, given the evidence and the current charges, we're expanding our investigation. Your business accounts have been frozen pending forensic accounting. We'll be examining every transaction for the past 5 years. 5 years, Kyle's voice was strangled. But the college fund? Dad said it was legitimate. Kyle, Gomez turned to him. You received transfers totaling $93,000 from accounts linked to fraudulent activities. You'll need to come in for questioning. I didn't know, Kyle protested, but his face had gone green. Dad said it was from the business. He said Lena agreed. Then you'll have the opportunity to explain that during your interview. Gomez replied. With your attorney present? Of course. The sound of another siren approached the ambulance. Someone had called. EMTs entered, immediately approaching me with their equipment. Ma'am, we need to examine you, one said gently. As they checked my pupils for signs of concussion, measured my blood pressure, and documented every mark on my skin, I watched Rick being led away. The crowd parted, his business associates stepping back as if failure might be contagious. 20 years of building his reputation, destroyed in 20 minutes. Wait! He called out desperately. Marjorie, tell them to stop. It's our anniversary. My mother finally moved, walking slowly toward him. For a moment, I thought she might defend him, might fall into old patterns. Instead, she looked at his face, then at mine, at the bruise darkening on my cheek, the torn dress, the exhaustion of 18 years of survival written in my posture. How could you? She whispered to Rick. She's my daughter. My daughter. She's destroying us, Rick insisted. No, Mom said quietly. You destroyed us the moment you raised your hand to her. The officers led Rick away, his protests echoing down the hall until the door closed behind them. Kyle followed separately, accompanied by another officer, his phone confiscated as evidence. The party guests stood in shocked clusters, processing what they'd witnessed. Morales knelt beside me as the EMT finished documenting my injuries. You did everything perfectly. The recordings, the positioning, the witnesses, it's all admissible. 3 months of planning, I murmured, exhaustion suddenly hitting me like a wave. The fraud charges alone will mean serious prison time, she continued. The assault just makes it federal. He's finished. Lena, it's over. The Blue Ridge Banquet Hall stood eerily quiet after the chaos. Half-empty champagne glasses dotted abandoned tables. The anniversary cake sat uncut, and the banner proclaiming 20 years of love hung like a cruel joke over the emptied dance floor. Police tape blocked off sections of the hallway where they'd collected evidence drops of my blood from where my mouth had been cut, fibers from the torn dress, Rick's fingerprints on the wall where he'd shoved me. Officer Kozlowski finished taking statements while crime scene photographers documented everything. The manager provided USB drives with security footage from 4 different angles, each one showing Rick's escalation from verbal abuse to physical violence with crystal clarity. "Ms. Hart," the manager said quietly, pulling me aside. "I want you to know we're fully cooperating with the investigation. What happened here tonight? No one should endure that." Morales had arranged for a different officer to drive me to Denver Health Medical Center. The emergency room was bright and sterile, a sharp contrast to the elegant venue we'd just left. A nurse photographed every bruise, the handprint on my face, the finger marks on my wrist, the swelling where my head had hit the wall. Each image was tagged, numbered, and added to the official case file. "Mild concussion," the doctor confirmed after running tests. "You'll need someone to monitor you for 24 hours. Patricia, who'd followed us to the hospital, immediately volunteered. "You're staying with me tonight. No arguments." While waiting for discharge papers, Gomez called with an update. The search of Dalton Roofing turned up more than we expected: hidden ledgers, a second set of books, and evidence of tax evasion going back 8 years. The FBI is taking over the financial crimes aspect. "What about the business accounts?" I asked. "Frozen indefinitely. Every transaction is being scrutinized. Mr. Dalton's assets, including the house, are being evaluated for seizure under asset forfeiture laws. The house, my childhood home that my father's life insurance had paid for, that Rick had remortgaged 3 times without my mother's knowledge. And Kyle, cooperating fully, claims he didn't know about the fraud, though his spending patterns suggest otherwise. He'll likely plea bargain for a reduced sentence in exchange for testimony." After giving my formal statement at the police station, a 2-hour process of documenting every incident, every forged document, every stolen dollar, I finally arrived at Patricia's apartment at 3:15 a.m. She made tea while I sat on her couch, still wearing the ruined dress because I hadn't thought to bring a change of clothes. 20 years, Patricia said softly. 20 years of watching him treat you like that, and we all just let it happen. Everyone assumed I was fine, I replied. Strong, independent Lena. She doesn't need help. You shouldn't have had to be that strong. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Staying at Helen's tonight. Rick's been denied bail flight risk due to hidden accounts they found. I'm sorry. For everything. We need to talk, but not tonight. Rest. The next morning, news spread fast. The Denver Construction Quarterly ran the story online. Prominent contractor arrested for assault and fraud at own anniversary party. The reporter's video had gone viral, not showing the actual violence, but the aftermath: Rick in handcuffs, screaming about entrapment while his business associates backed away in horror. Morales called at noon. Rick's attorney is pushing for a plea deal, 15 years minimum for the federal charges, plus the state assault charge. Without a deal, he's looking at 25 to 30. Good, I said, feeling nothing but tired relief. The Blue Ridge Banquet Hall manager called to inform me they'd preserved all evidence and would testify if needed. 3 of Rick's clients called to distance themselves from him and apologize for not intervening sooner. Mrs. Henderson sent flowers with a note. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. That evening, I returned to my apartment for the first time since the party. Everything looked the same, but felt different, lighter somehow, like the air pressure had changed. I pulled out the letter I'd written to my 14-year-old self and opened it. You were right to protect yourself, I'd written. Right to document everything. Right to wait for the perfect moment. They'll call it revenge, but it's not. It's justice. It's choosing yourself after years of being told you didn't matter. 3 weeks later, I sat in a federal courtroom as Rick pled guilty to 14 counts of fraud, identity theft, and assault. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, his carefully maintained businessman facade stripped away. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he remained silent. Kyle got 18 months minimum security and 5 years probation. The $93,000 in his accounts was seized. Dalton Roofing was liquidated, its assets distributed among creditors and victims including me. Mom filed for divorce the day after Rick's arrest. We started therapy together, slowly rebuilding what 20 years of manipulation had destroyed. It wasn't easy. Trust, once shattered, reassembles differently. But we were trying. The Blue Ridge Banquet Hall offered to host a different kind of party my 33rd birthday. 6 months later, I declined. That building had served its purpose as the stage for Rick's downfall. I didn't need to return. Standing in my apartment now, I looked at the torn dress hanging in my closet. I'd kept it as evidence, but also as a reminder. Not of trauma, but of transformation. Of the moment I stopped being a victim and became my own advocate. The investigation revealed Rick had stolen over $400,000 through various schemes. The insurance fraud alone totaled $200,000. Every penny he'd taken from me while calling me selfish. Every dollar he'd redirected while preaching about family values. All documented in careful columns that would follow him to federal prison. My phone rang Morales with a final update. The federal asset forfeiture is complete. After legal fees and restitution to other victims, you'll receive approximately $300,000. Not enough to cover what I'd lost over the years, but enough to know the scales had finally balanced. I thought about that moment in the hallway when Rick raised his hand. I could have ducked, could have fought back. Instead, I'd stood still and let him show everyone who he really was. Sometimes the greatest strength isn't in fighting, it's in knowing when to let your opponent defeat himself. The bruises had faded, the torn dress had been preserved as evidence, and the security footage had been watched by jury members who unanimously agreed Rick Dalton was guilty on all counts. But more than legal vindication, I'd reclaimed something I hadn't realized he'd stolen: my voice. For 20 years, I'd whispered my truth to lawyers and accountants, documented it in folders and flash drives. That night at the Blue Ridge Banquet Hall, I'd finally spoken it aloud, clear and undeniable, with witnesses and cameras and cops taking notes. They laughed when my dress tore. They gasped when he hit me. They watched in silence as he was led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling in real time. And me, I stood tall in my torn dress and spoke my truth. The champagne flute from the party still sat on my kitchen counter. I'd apparently carried it out without realizing. I picked it up now, still containing flat champagne and lipstick marks from that night. Then I washed it clean, filled it with fresh water, and raised it to the window where Denver's skyline glittered in the setting sun. To speaking up, I said, to no one and everyone, to fighting back, to justice served cold and documented in triplicate. The water was crisp and clean going down, nothing like the bitter champagne of that night. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that in one small apartment, a woman who'd been silenced for 20 years had finally, definitively, won. The dress stayed in my closet, torn and powerful, a silk battle flag marking the night everything changed. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Please comment below and let me know what city or country you're in. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences and perspectives matter, and I read every single one.